Mr Stephen Gethins.
Well, I do beg to move the amendment in my name, that indeed of the Right Honourable Member for Murray and other colleagues, including representatives of the different constituent parts of the United Kingdom. And I thank colleagues from across the House for having backed our amendment today. Can I also say, Mr Speaker, what a privilege it is to follow the Right Honourable Member for Rushcliffe, who's spoken a huge amount of sense to the House today, and a great deal more sense than we hear from these benches, certainly in recent times. He made some exceptional points. I thank him for the points that he's made, and it's a privilege for us that he'll be voting with us tomorrow evening. In particular, he made some good points about the benefits of the European Union, and it's important that we reflect even briefly on those. The EU has had an impact on all of us, from the progress that we have made as Member States on protecting rights, workers' rights, parents' rights, the environment, to helping secure peace, security and prosperity over the past 70 years, something that was never, ever guaranteed. There are endless reasons for voting for our amendment today, Mr Speaker, and I know that a number of my colleagues will be touching upon that over today and tomorrow. But one of the big ones, and one of the main ones, has to be the question around scrutiny. For what is the purpose in having a parliament? What is the purpose in us all being here if it is not to scrutinise the work of the government? And I have to say that this government's unwillingness to put this decision under any kind of proper scrutiny reflects a lack of confidence in their own position about the process once this has been done. It is good to see that, in spite of the government's best efforts, that we are going to get a say on the triggering of Article 50, but we did have to drag them kicking and screaming and at great expense into this situation. I also think that it's imperative on all members in this House to reflect on the debt of gratitude that we owe to Gina Miller, who has made this debate today possible, and all of us should reflect on that. But today I want to reflect on our amendment. Primarily, what we want is scrutiny. In our white paper, in the white paper that is yet to be published, and it's interesting that you're not publishing a white paper by the time we have a debate, and you want to publish a white paper after we have had a debate and after the bill has been passed. That must surely be unprecedented. Secondly, I'll talk about the lack of respect for the devolution settlement, also the consequences of leaving the EU without certainty, and the kind of vision of the UK that are being created. One enormous step that the government could have made, and this was touched upon by the Honourable Member for Rushcliffe and for the member for Holborn and St Pancras, is the position of European nationals who contribute so much to our country. And when you're needing friends of influence, as this government surely is, that would have been quite what they should do, is to give those EU nationals the certainty that we need. Let me reflect for a moment on why we are here with so much uncertainty. The Leave campaign campaigned on a blank piece of paper. Yeah. That was an act of gross irresponsibility and an act of negligence which has been carried over by this government over the past 9 months. Yeah. That goes to the heart of why we need a white paper. And I have to say, and the Minister, as Secretary of State, retaking his place, that Leave ministers, those who are currently in government and those who are previously in government, have particular culpability around the uncertainty in which we find ourselves at the moment. So, will we get the white paper before the committee stage? Will we go through the normal process that we see a white paper before a bill is passed? And it's certainly been the practice in the past when this place has been given a say. The member for Rushcliffe was reflecting on European debates gone by. Maybe as a reminder, I can tell members, Mr Speaker, that before the Amsterdam Treaty and the negotiations in 1996, John Major published a white paper before he went into those negotiations. Gordon Brown, and the Foreign Secretary is not in his place anymore, it was Gordon Brown who was in charge when the Lisbon Treaty went through, published a white paper. Mr Speaker, what are they afraid of? My right honourable friend, the member for Gordon, is in his place just now. He's got some experience of referendums and of scrutiny. This is what a proper white paper looks like. 670 pages of details 670 pages of detail about what the country looks like, published a year before the referendum, instead of scrabbling about for the odd detail almost a year after the referendum. That's a disgrace, and they should be ashamed. And on that point, I'll give way to the gentleman.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. Could the honourable gentleman tell this House what that white paper told the people of Scotland, what currency they would be using should they have voted for Scotland? The currency.
Well, the honourable member raises a good point. Because you know what the white paper talked about? It talks about the currency, and he's right. And actually, even more than the white paper, there was a fiscal commission working group that was set up. My words, there was so much work put into it, so much more. And actually, on the point of modernity and the progress for this country, I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman, but I seem to remember that the Scottish people blew a large raspberry at that white paper.
Well, the Scottish people had the opportunity to discuss it and debate it. And I'll say to the honourable member, it's a great pity that he doesn't trust the people enough to give them some details and went on a blank page. And that. And can I gently remind the House, this is a big deal. You're not just divvying up the Nana Muscuri records here or divvying up the Borgen box set. This has an impact on each and every one of us. Each and every one of us, this has an impact on. We publish the details. We can reflect on that. You don't have the courage of your convictions. And what about the devil?
Order. I know the honourable gentleman is in a state of great animation and excitement, and I don't want to spoil that for him. But I have always had the courage of my convictions. Therefore, his breach of parliamentary protocol in this case is mildly offensive. And can I just remind him that debate therefore goes through the chair? The word "you" is not only not required, it should be deleted from any part of his text. Mr. Stephen Gethins.
I apologise, Mr. Speaker. You, of course, have the courage of your convictions every time. Those on the government benches may be a different matter altogether. But it's well said, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that you will also agree with me that scrutiny is a good thing. It strengthens governance and it has a major role to play. Now, let me talk about the devolution settlement. And I'm going to talk about what's been happening. The Minister earlier on talked about listening. He says a great deal about listening, but I've not seen anything that's changed so far from all this listening that's been going on. I've not been seeing any changes. They were listening in Cardiff all day yesterday, and we've seen nothing. Now, the court decision made the point that this is a political decision. The decision to involve the devolved administrations should be a political one. The Secretary of State for Scotland has also said that the bill will put the Sewell Convention onto a statutory footing. If that was the case, and he was true to his word, then we would not be in the situation that we were in just now. And Mr. Speaker, only two plans have come forward. One from the Scottish Government about Scotland's place in Europe, and I'm going to pay credit to my Plaid Cymru and to the Labour colleagues who managed to pull together a plan from the Welsh Government as well. And fair play to them for putting aside their political differences and producing more detail. The Scottish Government plans have won praise from stakeholders and European partners across the spectrum to maintain our place in the single market, to give new powers to the Scottish Parliament, as suggested by the member for Sutton Heath indeed, and to ensure that EU nationals can continue to play. And on that point, I'll give way to the honourable lady who's been...
Mr. Speaker, I'm somewhat confused. And it's taken a long time for the honourable gentleman to take my intervention, but I am somewhat confused how he expects to get a 600-page white paper on a two-clause bill. Could he explain that to me?
Well, the honourable lady says she's confused. I'll make this point. If the Minister of State comes forward with a white paper that's not quite 670 pages, I think we'll be okay with that on these benches. If he comes forward with a white paper, it would be some progress. But she's a little bit confused. Can I remind on a point of democracy, on the Conservative benches, that they got their worst general election result in Scotland since 1865. They could do with a little bit of listening. They're being pulled by the nose by UKIP, who have never even saved their parliamentary deposit. Can I say on democracy, they govern on 15% of the vote, they claim a victory on 1 in 5 voters, and they want to bring powers back to this place and hand them to the House of Lords. Mr. Speaker, the consequences of leaving the EU will be significant. I won't give way anymore. The consequences of leaving the EU will be significant on universities and opportunities that I had and people should continue to have. Our environment and low-carbon industries. Paragraph 22 of the explanatory white paper said this bill is not expected to have financial implications. Mr. Speaker, that is courageous indeed. Finally, on vision. This is, and I'm not going to take any more points, this is a debate...
Order. I'm sorry. The honourable gentleman has made it clear that he is not giving way. And can I just gently say there's an enormous amount of heckling taking place, sometimes from the honourable gentleman's own benches. They're heckling more loudly than I shout when I'm watching Britain in the Davis Cup. And I don't do that while play is in progress. Mr. Stephen Gethins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me gently remind colleagues about this, as well as a lesson on democracy and their abject failure in terms of winning any kind of vote in Scotland. We're at a crossroads, and this House is at a crossroads today. Are we going to have one of continuing progress and prosperity, whereby we maintain a close relationship with our partners in Europe, as set out by the Scottish Government in its plans? One that was a compromise when we failed to see any kind of compromise from the other side. Political opponents in Wales have been able to compromise. The Scottish Government, in spite two-thirds of people in Scotland voting to remain in the European Union, have been able to set out a compromise. Alternatively, the alternate to that is a path of isolationism and exceptionalism that leaves us scrabbling around for friends, desperately scrabbling around for friends, and the Prime Minister who has left the place will note the reaction to our visit to Washington on the streets, the length and breadth of the United Kingdom. Going back in history, Scotland has done well as an EU member state. I want to see us continue with research, trade, political alliances going back centuries, and where sharing sovereignty is a good thing. As another lesson to the honourable gentleman, I hope they'll listen this time. That's sharing sovereignty. What isn't sharing sovereignty is being forced to have a Trident missile submarine that the Scottish people are against and that 98.5% of Scottish MPs have moved against. What isn't sovereign is being taken out of the European Union against your will, and what isn't sovereign is having a Tory government that's got one MP in charge of your state of affairs.
Where is he?
Mr. Speaker, Europe is where our future lies. It's one where we tackle inequality, climate change, refugees get help, areas that don't get much of a hearing in Whitehall these days. Pooling our sovereignty and working together is a good thing. Passing this bill and turning your back on our amendment would turn its back on the progress made and disrespect the devolution settlement. Mr. Speaker, I would urge members to vote for our amendment. Otherwise, this is a backward and damaging step, and it is an act of constitutional and economic sabotage.
Order.